We move to the next session of our meeting, technical session. Today we have one of our eminent speaker from Flat6Labs Bahrain with us to speak about rise of startups. The speaker, Saleh Abbas, Senior Program Manager, Flat6Labs Bahrain. Saleh has worked on multiple large-scale projects in Bahrain, such as launch of Dragon City, and played a key role in the launch of Flat6Labs Bahrain, Mena largest accelerator network. He is responsible for running the accelerator, scouting startups, establishing investor networks, forming strategic partnerships both regionally and across the globe. Let us invite our speaker, Saleh Abbas, to address the session. Mr. Saleh Abbas.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I think today on the agenda what we'll be discussing is there's some questions that have already been curated which will be asked, and we'll do a short interview. I'll start off with a quick presentation about Flat6Labs, our accelerator, and to give you an idea of especially the Bahrain entity and where we're at right now. And then towards the end of the session, once the moderator is finished with his questions, we can proceed with any questions that the members may have as well. So I guess I'll just kind of first start off with, I'll just share my screen for a second to go through the presentation. I think whoever's the host needs to enable the share screen.
I'm going to make you the host, Saleh, so that you have their access. Just give me a minute.
Okay, sure.
The access has been given.
All right. All right, so can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we have to be in the, yeah.
All right, great. So this is actually pertaining to cycle 5. We're in our 5th cycle now, and this is just a short kind of overview of where we're at now. So I think to start off with, before I go into Flat6Labs, is just to kind of give you a differentiation between, we get mixed up a lot between incubator and then accelerator, and so you usually find people mixing the two. When in reality they're meant to be completely different with the purpose that they serve. So with an incubator, it's more of a facility that a lot of you should probably be familiar with, as it's quite an old model now. And it's more sort of a co-working space, or you can rent a small office space where you'd basically get access to basic services pretty much to support your business. Whereas with an accelerator, they're usually specific to innovative business models, and it's typically, there's different models of accelerators, but the one that we have is that we're joint with a venture capital company. So firstly, we're investors, and we have an accelerator that kind of facilitates making sure that we mitigate the risk of our investments on our startups. And the way we do that is with an accelerator, it's just how it sounds pretty much. It's that we try and really speed up the development of the business, whether that's to do with product development or even the rollouts on the market and gaining traction as far as revenue, and also onboarding potential clientele and users. That's kind of like the basis of what we're supposed to be specialists at. And along with that, we address 3 fundamentals, which are the biggest barriers that we find nowadays, especially when you want to go into disruptive startups, disruptive industries. You're looking for the best talent and the best minds. So it's not one of those businesses where you want to just take anybody and try and put them in charge. You really want it to be the guy who's being inspired to have that vision, who kind of leads, at least, especially at the very beginning. We can go into further conversation on how later stage investments work and how things work as companies scale and how like the organization changes. But initially at the beginning, you'll see that a lot of the bright people that have good disruptive ideas, they're hindered by 3 main points. And That's extremely prevalent, especially within our region, and also probably in India as well, where one is access to capital. And so we provide that in a very limited amount that's there just to basically allow them to go full time into pursuing their business for the span of 6 to 7 months. Is called a pre-seed investment. And then we also address the other part, which is expertise. So usually you'll find founders that they're either decent on the business side, but very weak on the technical side when it comes to product development, or they're missing gaps when it comes to, for example, marketing or understanding how to set up their organizational structure. And so we have leading experts in all of these fields. Flat6Labs Bahrain personally has over 100 mentors. And so they'll come in and it'll be our job to sort of identify these gaps. So along with us being able to have a tailored kind of 3-month program that addresses all of these topics, we'll actually do further work with specific founders based on where we think they have major deficiencies. And at the same time, we also will work on basically business development and things of that nature. And the third biggest barrier that they face is usually their network. Similar to the whole reason that your association exists is that you're much more powerful in numbers. And especially in this region, you know, in Arabic, we call it wasta, but you have an issue where there's a lot of barriers if you don't have the right connections, and connections can really speed things up, especially when it comes to, you know, dealing with regulations or, you know, trying to meet the right people, and especially in a B2B model where you're trying to get through to certain corporate partners, for example. So those are the 3 main things that we try to achieve, is to give access to capital, mentorship, and extremely extensive network. So Flat6Labs in the MENA region, we're the biggest early stage VC and accelerator in the whole of the Arab world. We started off in Cairo in 2011. We then shifted on to KSA and Beirut and Tunis, and then Bahrain was the latest one to launch. And we're planning to launch in Amman, Jordan at the end of this year. Bahrain's a little bit different because the rest they're focusing on their local startup ecosystem. Whereas with Bahrain, because we're right next to Saudi, and also because we have you know, a legitimate kind of market where we can pilot between 2 different parties, whether it's the expatriates or the locals, we can hit that product market fit and scale it into the Saudi market. So we've kind of made our value add to be the strategic soft landing for international startups that would like to scale into the Saudi market and then into the GCC and the rest of the MENA region. So moving on to the next slide. This is just an overview of our metrics. We've got over 270 portfolio companies so far. Over 30,000 applications have been received to enter our program, with over 700 mentors and coaches. Over $50 million of follow-on funding has been raised. Now, this is an extremely important metric because this is how you can really decipher, you know, you get a lot of startup programs and accelerators and, you know, different claims of how they can help support in exchange for equity. But in reality, it's the ability for the startups you have to secure follow-on funding that reflect on the quality and the success of your program as a venture capital company. So we've also got over 100 major corporate partners across the region, and we've created over 2,500 jobs so far. So for Flat6Labs Bahrain, we launched in March 2018. Our plan was to support over 42 startups over the course of 3 years, with a $32,000 seed investment open to local and international startups. The only mandate being that they incorporate in Bahrain. Other than that, they can be from anywhere in the world. We've received in Bahrain over 1,100 applications for the first 5 cycles. We've just started our 5th cycle just over a week ago, and we've now reached 36 startups that we have invested in. So through this initiative, we've created over 100 full-time jobs. We have 200 mentors in our network in Bahrain, not counting the regional network of mentors. And we've formed over 50 plus partnerships, and over 1,000 hours of training so far has gone into our entrepreneurs. So where we've really stood out is in the region, and even amongst our own accelerators, is we've created the fastest follow-on and the highest ratio of follow-on funding out of for an accelerator, which has been at over 50%. So far, we've raised over $2.1 million through our startups, which is more than a 2.5 multiplier on the actual capital that we've invested in the startups. So it's a pretty strong indicator that we're getting it right over here in Bahrain. So the applications, they've consisted of from over 50 countries and over 55 nationalities. And these are some of our major stars that we've had so far. All of them, they're hitting now around a $3 to $5 million valuation each as a company. We've got Sync, who were based out of New Zealand and now have relocated and headquartered in Bahrain. Inagrab, which is a Bahraini startup, and Telp as well. So with Telp, they're basically a booking platform to connect with verified tutors in specific content matter. And they've actually now, due to the COVID crisis, they've pivoted and they've gone into online sessions, which is a topic I think we can discuss a bit later on in the seminar. Inagrab, they've also completely pivoted their product to being a marketing affiliate program, which is called Daluni. And so basically, they deal with everything from e-commerce sales to renting properties, almost everything you can imagine that you could be an affiliate of. They've kind of got it covered on their platform. And over here with Sync, you've got basically a timesheet software, who are a very interesting case because their main market is really the USA, but they've made a useful study case for Bahrain and the EDB on how Bahrain is so strategic as a spot where, due to all the subsidies that you get through Tamkeen, it's viable for you to actually consider it as your hub. And then when you're dealing with software that you can scale to Western markets, but keep your costs over here, which basically keeps your overhead a lot lower and gives you a longer cash runway for your business. So moving on to the next slide. This is kind of how our program works. So we start off with, this is an initiative that we do throughout the year, where we're constantly reaching out and trying to inspire first the younger generation through universities and through entrepreneurship programs, educating them on ideation and like also on how to create decent startup pitches, who will then become a pipeline in the future for us to invest in. And then when it comes to immediate startups that we scout, we look mainly at we have local partners, we have international ecosystem partners, which are also other accelerators, co-working spaces, associations similar to yours all over the world that spread the word whenever we have a call to application, and then they send in all their applications to us. And also we attend in person. Pre-COVID, we used to attend in person all of the major global startup events. And that's where we would put ourselves forward, but would also try and put Bahrain up there as a strong strategic location for startups that are looking to scale into the MENA region. So when it comes to the actual acceleration, the way we get to the final 8 is that usually we'll get anywhere between 300 to 400 applications per cycle. We do 2 cycles per year, so 6 months per cycle. And what we end up doing is we will narrow it down to around 50 to 60 startups out of that total pool. And then I'll be doing personal interviews with each of the team. And after that, we'll shorten it down to an additional 20. And those 20 will bring over to Bahrain. And we'll put them through a 1-week boot camp, which is kind of a quick accelerated version of our program, where we kind of go over the fundamentals of how they pitch, their business model, how they're monetizing, and also understanding how venture capital and equity works. And then we put them into a selection committee, which is very similar to Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, if any of you have seen it before. And they will basically pitch in front of 5 people on the selection panel, which will be a mixture of our LP, us, and also 2 independent people that we change each cycle, which will usually be successful entrepreneurs, and we keep them in there so that we can have an unbiased point of view, and we don't, always have the same kind of outcome each time. It's kind of to help equalize the decision making. And then afterwards, we tally everybody's votes, and we usually will have the top 3 or 4 that are immediately in, and then we'll deliberate and basically discuss who the last 4 will be that will enter the program. And once they're in the program, they receive seed funding in the form of $32,000 in exchange for 5 to 10% that's a pre-money evaluation. And the reason I say pre-money, it means we're putting them in a valuation gap between $320,000 to $640,000 as a total valuation. But post-money, their valuation changes. So once we've actually invested and signed with them, we're an extremely well-known early stage VC in the region, and naturally we get approached by angels, by other VCs, some of whom immediately are interested in investing in our top 2 or 3 in that batch. And even if it's the next day, we look at the valuation as a 60 to 80% increase minimum on the total valuation, because of the value that we bring as an organization and the network that we bring as well, which is, it's all about risk, right? Like once we're on board, we're mitigating the risk again by a huge amount. And that's why a lot of them come
I have
forward.
one question. I have one question in the context of pre-money. How do you actually put the valuation of 320 to 640? Is it just a random number, or is there a mechanics involved in getting to that pre-money valuation?
Yeah, there's a mechanics involved. Basically, the way you judge it, so when you're very early stage, you're pre-revenue usually. So that naturally makes it very difficult, especially for people in traditional business, to give them a valuation, right? Because they don't have the financial metrics to really be able to do any kind of historical or even forecast analysis, right? So what we do is, the way we look at it, usually there's a few factors. There's the team, the strength of the founders and their background, how strong you think they are as far as the ability to execute, which is why you get some founders where they'll leave a company, but they've exited a very successful company. And then when they enter, they have a new idea, they had nothing. They might just have a one-pager and do a very simple presentation to investors, but people will throw huge amounts of money at them because they'll realize these guys have an incredible track record, and they're most likely going to pull this off. So they want to get in early as well. But with us, it would be that we look at the team, we look at the stage they're at, and by that I mean, do they have an MVP? An MVP is a minimum viable product. So it's where are they at with their product development? Are they idea phase? Are they prototyping? Are they already fully at their minimum viable product and ready to launch onto the market? Are they pre-revenue? Are they post-revenue? So the way it changes is the fixed sum is the same. It's always $32,000. But when you're going between that 5% to 10% mark, you'll go more towards 5% if you've got a strong team, you've already got a product, and you've got maybe just the beginnings of traction and revenue. When I say traction, I mean like a lot of platforms, they might not be creating revenue, but they've proven that they're a popular service or that they're a popular product, and they've onboarded a lot of users. And then afterwards, you can kind of figure out how you're going to monetize that community. And so that's sort of the way it works. It'll be more towards 10% when they're very early stage, and maybe there's only one founder. He hasn't got a solid team. He's got a good idea, but he still has a lot of development to do on his product. And that's when you start to look at us taking that maximum amount of equity at 10%. Now, a question that I get a lot of the times is, yeah, but even at 10%, you're valuating this company at $320,000, and realistically, they have nothing at this point to be valued at $320,000. But the thing is, the whole point of our model is to create a pipeline and enable entrepreneurs to be able to, in the future, grow a huge scalable company, right? And so 320 is all almost the minimum you can go with evaluation because of two things. One is if you give a ticket size investment any lower than $32,000, you're really not offering them much financial help. So it's almost pointless when you're dropping below that amount. Secondly, if you take more than 10% of equity, you're gonna be you're losing the incentive for the next investor to come on board, because beyond 10%, that's already a massive chunk you've taken away of ownership in the company. And then this company, usually they need to go on to raise multiple rounds. So we're at a pre-seed round, then there's a seed round, then there's a pre-series A, there's a series A, series B, series C, series D. And these are like, when you look at Uber and Kareem and all these guys, they've had to go through all these multiple rounds. And the only reason they've been able to do that is because at the beginning, they didn't have too much equity given up, and they had a lot of room to sell shares and ownership in the company to investors. So that kind of is the reason why you can never drop below a valuation of $320,000, regardless of where they're at. You always need to keep it between that $320,000 to $640,000 valuation, pretty much. And we can go further into that later on in the seminar. But yeah, so once we give them the investment, we move on to, we've got our world-class mentors. We have a training program. So what I do personally is all of this. So I do the scouting for the startups. I head the program. I structure the program. I get us the mentors that we need to fill certain topic matter. And then at the end, I take those startups and I try and raise further investment from external investors, which validates the company, because it will show that it's not just us that see the value in them, it's other companies that see value in them at a higher valuation at a later stage. So, after they've gone through all of that, we've got, they get the office space for 6 months. We set them up with business development through our corporate partners. And we also have our own legal team, which helps them with a local incorporation. And then later on, we do a global incorporation in Delaware when we're looking to raise funds internationally. And so the final phase is the growth phase. So the growth phase, we've got our demo day. Our demo day was pretty much one of the main, or the main ecosystem event pretty much in Bahrain. And that's twice a year. And before, we were always hosting it usually at the Ritz-Carlton. It's where we would invite the media, high net worth individuals, family offices, ambassadors, government officials, ministers, and we would really raise all these startups on a platform. And that's our way of kind of saying, this is the outcome after 4 months of acceleration. This is where they're at now. And this is where they actually start to have a financial ask. And the demo day serves two purposes. One is to give exposure to the startups, both through the media and also to investors, but also to get the local community engaged in the scene. So one thing we're really trying to drive as Flat6Labs is to get the universities on board, to get the local business families on board, because this is still, we're a little bit behind compared to, say, especially the West, as far as everyone's awareness of startup and disruptive technologies and these new kind of business models and innovation, which it's starting to ramp up. We are seeing that in the MENA region, there's a massive increase on deal flow every single year, but we still have a bit to go before we can catch up with the likes of Southeast Asia and Europe and North America, and even South America right now are really they're really moving quite far ahead as well. So yeah, so that kind of completes the program. After the program's over, we have a seat on the board of these companies, and we continue to meet with them every month. And also, we're still there to support them with anything that they need help with in the future going forward. So we're really strategic partners to them. So here's an example of some of the partners we have. Major partners that have really helped us out, the EDB, Tamkeen, AWS is big, Amazon Web Services. They support our startups by giving them a huge amount of credits at the beginning of the program. Gulf Air has supported us through sponsorships, so has Zain. Zain's also been become like one of our closest partners as far as helping raise awareness of our startups as well. They're very proactive in the startup scene. And Microsoft is similar to AWS, also offering credits for hosting on their servers. An example of our mentors. So we've got, you know, a lot of people that are recognizable in Bahrain. We've got Trey Goad, who's from the Saudi Aramco venture fund that they've set up over there. We've got Jamal Fahro from KPMG, and many more. I think you probably recognize most of the faces. I don't think you need me to go through them. And these are actually the 5 startups that I'll be launching tomorrow, but that's kind of, if you want to know more about them, I'll give you the link to register for our cycle launch tomorrow, and you'll be able to see all of these startups pitching tomorrow. And that's kind of where they are at the beginning of the program. And then on demo day, you'll see how much they've dramatically improved, and you'll see them pitch in the demo day as well. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. And now I think we can move ahead with the questions, and you can remove me as host if you like as well. You're on mute right now, I think.
Yeah, you will have to give the control back to ICI Bahrain.
All right. How do I do that?
You toggle. You can just move your cursor on ICI Bahrain. It will show you more, and there you will see change host or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. That part's done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Saleh, for the very crisp, presentation about Flat6Labs and the kind of work that you have been doing since inception. And I would like to know, as a first question, what is the role of Tamkeen in this whole dynamics of Flat6Labs and supporting this accelerator model?
Yeah. So Tamkeen, they're the financial LP. So LP means limited partner. Every fund has limited partners. Usually, it depends which country. In some of them, it's usually a mixture of the government and financial institutions, banks, private equity firms, things of that nature. And so they're investors in our fund. So essentially what we are is we're fund managers, right? But we specialize in venture capital, which is, usually considered pretty volatile. You get a lot of people that they pop up in this scene and then they disappear because their first portfolio has performed very badly and then they don't have credibility anymore in managing those kind of funds. But yeah, to sum it up, they're our investor in the fund in Bahrain. So that's where the mandate of the 42 startups over the course of 3 years comes from. It's also a benefit to the startups because naturally they can benefit from their subsidies and things of that nature. And it's proven to be probably one of the best vehicles that an economic fund like the Tamkeen Labor Fund could really use. So, you get subsidies, you get grants, you get all of these forms that they use to try and boost the economy. However, it's super difficult to moderate it and to really see the impact and whether these funds are being utilized efficiently or whether there's loopholes that are being exposed, right? Whereas the main idea is to be able to have high-skilled job creation and also to bring in new industries into the country. And so through this, it's like you can directly correlate the economic impact, whether it's the number of jobs or number of startups created. And you can also see, is there an actual effect on, instead of that money just sort of being flushed down the drain, like it would be with a grant, I'll actually get a return on my investment and then be able to take that investment and reinvest again into the economy, right? So I'd say it's the most efficient form that, a lot of sovereign wealth funds are now starting to pursue all over the world, pretty much.
The question answers are open for all the members. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can ask the questions to Mr. Saleh. Saleh, over the last few years of your involvement with Flat6, what are the kind of sectors in which you see a recurring number of startups coming up. Whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it is tourism. So, what kind of sector mix have you been seeing?
Yeah. So what I've been seeing so far is it's actually a very diverse mix. So the thing is, the advantage that we have here is that because, like I said earlier, is we're a bit behind on the startup scene, is that we have a very unsaturated startup ecosystem, right? So a lot of verticals are pretty empty, and so there's a lot of room to exploit. So usually you'll get accelerators at some point when they're in a very developed ecosystem, they need to start going very specific and specializing on certain verticals, whether it's AI, whether it's IoT. But if you were to do that now, you would basically be choking yourself, because you'd be in an ecosystem where there's just not enough going on for you to focus on just one vertical. You need to stay sector agnostic, and that way you get a good amount of deal flow and you make good investments. And that's the main objective, right? At the end of the day, is to make sure that you're making sound investments and out of a good pool of applicants. But we've seen a lot of people trying to address B2C issues, which is to fill every gap. EdTech's a major one. We've had health tech, which ironically was, probably would have been a very difficult one to enter the market, and to, especially the psychology of our market, for us to get early adopters on this whole idea of remote consultation and telemedicine. But luckily, during that program, 2 months into it, COVID hit. And all of a sudden, this went from being probably the one that would lag behind in demand to being the most demand out of all the solutions we had on display. B2B wise, people, they love SaaS models. So that's something we're always looking at. And it's because of the stability of that subscription model, where it's very predictable for investors, and it's very sticky as well. You don't have to worry about a change all of a sudden in the market. Usually, even during COVID, the companies that have SaaS business models, which is a subscription as a service, basically they're the ones that have still retained a good amount of cash flow, because people aren't quick to pull out of monthly subscriptions, and there are some that are on annual subscriptions, so they can't pull out anyway, and they're gonna weather the storm. But it's really hard to define one major prominent one, because I'd say that I've seen an equal jump in multiple sectors, whether it's health tech, whether it's ed tech. We've even started to look at different companies that are going into different sorts of remote solutions based towards drone technology and things of that nature. So yeah, it's right now it's a pretty wide field that there's demand for almost every single vertical in the country.
Right. One other question, Saleh, is Bahrain has always been taking a lead in many of the developments in terms of growth of business, making Bahrain friendly, business friendly Bahrain, and the likes of that. So how do you see Bahrain standing among the GCC countries in terms of this accelerator model of supporting new startups?
Yeah, so I would say where we stand, I would say we make a lot more sense. Like, I mean, I go over to Dubai 2-3 times a year, and I go to these startup conferences there, and I've met with international startups that have chosen to locate themselves in Dubai. And, then I'd talk to them about Bahrain and what we have on offer. And a lot of the times they would actually be shocked, and they would actually feel some regret that they had chosen Dubai with its massive overhead costs to actually try and locate out of there to attack the Arab market, which is, it's because of that kind of smoke and mirrors that Dubai has about it, where it's got a lot of fame. It's very popular in the West, and it's got the glitz and the glamour, but at the end of the day, the biggest market is not Dubai or UAE. The biggest market is Saudi, and we're much closer to Saudi. So one of the key points to keep in mind is that the Eastern Province is responsible for around 60% of the financial transactions that happen in the GCC. And that's right next door to us, right? It's just like 30 minutes away. So especially if you're a B2B solution, you're looking at huge clients and consumers on that side. So geographically, we're better suited than Dubai. When it comes to skilled labor, we're better suited there as well. We've got some of the highest skilled labor in the GCC. The wages are lower over here. The living cost is lower over here. The Tamkeen actively subsidizes all businesses, and they don't have any bias. As long as you're incorporated in Bahrain, you're considered a Bahraini startup, and you have the right to access those subsidies. You know, so I'd say when you summarize all of that, along with the quality of living, and the fact that you've got a very sort of westernized society in comparison to most GCC countries, it really puts us on an extremely competitive level to make the argument that we are probably the most strategic place for an international startup to relocate to if we're looking to go into the GCC market.
Thank you.
Okay, Saleh, I have one question.
Sure.
My question is, what are the criteria this industrialist or the business idea person has to meet to avail your seed capital? Or what are the criteria you will put for, or demand conditions you will put for to be eligible for the seed capital?
All right, so we look at there's a few things, but you know the major things would be, one is do you have like a fit? Like it depends, right? Like so if the reason I say it depends is because I'll go back to Sync. Sync are an exception. They're the startup I spoke of, who their main clientele are in the USA, and the founders are originally from New Zealand. So usually I'd say that first we want to see that there's going to be a product market fit for the MENA region and for the GCC market. But in their case, originally their product did not have a product market fit for our region because they were specialized in timesheets specific to small to medium businesses in the blue collar contracting work in that vertical. And so naturally in the West, those jobs have huge salaries per hour. So their solution had a massive demand for it, but it wasn't the case over here in this region. However, with them, we made an exception because they had an exceptional team. They already had revenue. They already had a product on the market. And in a way, we were almost fortunate to convince them to see us as a strategic partner and to come over to Bahrain. And we sold Bahrain more as the strength of why they should join. Because we're like, this is a good place for you to build your software development team out of. And that's exactly what they did. But that's an exception. That's not really the rule. So in general, what I would say is that we look to see that you have a product that makes sense for the market here in the region. The other one is what stage you're at. We say that we'll accept applications from idea phase, but realistically, you'll never get to that final 8 out of 400 if you're at idea phase, because you have to keep in mind you're competing with so many other startups, right? So we're always going to go for the ones, it's all about risk to us. So we're always going to go for the ones where our risk is mitigated the most. And that means like the further your products develop, the better. The fact that you're a founder and you have extremely relevant background to be able to, whether it's your expertise in the solution, or whether it's that you've got the right network to be able to grow this once it launches onto the market, is also a major factor as well. So I'd say it's those three are the main things that we look at. And it's the idea that you're doing something that's not being replicated over here. I wouldn't say that it has to be unique, because nowadays in the world, believe me, you'll find almost no model that's really unique. There's someone doing it somewhere else in the world. It's just about who consolidates to the point that they become a household name, and those are the guys who get the recognition in that field, you know. But like for us, it's more that you've got a solution that's new to this market.
Ranga, you can go ahead with your question, please.
Saleh, thanks very much for a very good presentation. It's interesting to know that companies like you also have based yourself in Bahrain. And Bahrain is such a market which allows for different ideas to come in. That way, it's very welcome to have. A quick couple of questions. Since you mentioned that you are kind of a VC manager kind of entity, are you regulated, number one? Number two is, are you working or are you intending to work with any of the local companies in Bahrain?
So yeah, we are regulated, and at the same time, do you mean by work with local companies that we invest in local companies, or what did you
No,
mean?
other entities which are, let's say you have entities that are outside which want to base themselves over here.
Yeah.
There could be other businesses which are already existing here which want to grow. That's what I meant by local entities.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So yeah, if that answers your question.
All right, thanks.
As long as it meets those 3 criteria that I spoke about, that's what we look at, and then yeah, we do.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Saleh.
Ajay,
I have one follow-up question. Okay, say for an example, now a business person will come with an idea which may not be that in a perfect shape. Will you assist them to make it in a structured manner, something like that?
I mean, so I get people all the time that they're at an idea stage, and you know, we won't be actively assisting them, but we're there to give them advice, and basically we're always, if we have you know, it depends on our schedules, but like if we're available at that time, then yeah, we're happy to sit down and have a discussion, and then try and help the founder kind of formulate how he's gonna, you know, approach turning this idea into an actual business. And we do that on a frequent basis, hoping that, you know, 1 out of 20 of these guys might actually come back with a good product, and we could end up investing in it.
Ajay, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks. So my question is a bit related to what Santosh just asked, in the sense, I mean, people have a lot of ideas. So it's a basic question. Many people have ideas now. You also mentioned it's a very competitive field of, you know, you're choosing something like 8 out of 400. So that's about like 4% success. So for people to actually, you know, to know whether what they're doing is a good idea, first of all, number one. And number two, if they have an idea, is there like a template or something that you provide on your website as to the requirements that people need to fill in before they know that they have a good chance of being considered, like you mentioned about risk factors and so on. So if those things are available in something like in a template, so I think it will help people and probably save a lot of your time as well, because you don't have to sift through all of these ideas and then, you know, discard them. So people can actually do some sort of a self-help, come up with certain structured plan and things like that, which will make it easier for you as well as for the participant, that, you know, they have done some work which they feel it might be worthwhile. So, and are there any common mistakes that you generally note when people make such sort of some submissions to you?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So I'll address the second question first, and then you're gonna have to remind me what the first question was. So basically, yeah, we do. So when you apply, you'd go onto our website. It's www.flat6labsbahrain.com. And that will take you to a portal called F6S. There'll be like a big button in the top right that says apply now. It takes you to this portal called F6S. And as you were saying, we have a template. And through there, we'll ask you about 20 questions. And so even if in your mind you haven't really thought out how to structure properly your business plan, we don't like business plans, right? Like, we don't have time to read through 25 pages with 400 people applying every 6 months. So we like to get the information as straightforward and condensed as possible, so that we can read through it and get a very good idea within a matter of like 5 minutes of reading through everything, right? And so yeah, there we'll ask you all kinds of questions about your product, about if you have already had prior investments or not, about, you know, what's your unique selling points, the team, the background of the team. So that goes in depth. And if you filled that out, that's usually already, you know, there's another space where you can upload your pitch deck. A pitch deck is very different from a business plan, but a pitch deck does an excellent job of conveying your business plan in the space of 12 slides or so. And it's usually something that, like, what we say is that the biggest skill of a startup or entrepreneur to have is to be able to pitch his startup in 2 forms. There's like an elevator pitch, which is 60 seconds. That's if you're on a really tight time frame. But realistically, if you have 5 minutes, you should really be able to cover everything. Like, the product, how it works, the problem, the solution, the market. So you should be able to even educate them on the market size, and what you're aiming to target in that market, the team. And you should be able to do that all in 5 minutes. If you're not able to do that all in 5 minutes, you've got a lot of fat to kind of cut out of the conversation, you know. And I think this is where a lot of people fail in general when it comes to how they speak to investors, because time is of essence, right? Like, and they're getting approached all the time. So the easier you make it for them, the higher your chances are going to be. So yeah, that kind of answers your second question. What was your first question?
That kind of answers both questions, because the first question was also just to understand what is a good idea in terms of, you know, somebody trying to pick up something, you know, what chances do they stand in terms of, you know, does the idea already exist or something like that?
Yeah, so I'd say also another good thing that you could do is if you were to go onto YouTube and you just typed in Flat6Labs Bahrain, you'll find our YouTube channel, and you'll find we have you know, a category that has all the pitches listed in it, and there you can look at all the startups that we've had pitch at all the demo days. And the demo is good because you're seeing them at the end of the program, so they're kind of refined at that point. And you can really you know, go through each one. Each one's about 4 minutes or so, and it'll give you an idea of how they do their pitch, how they present, how the aesthetics of the slides work as well. So I'd say those are the best example. And I'm not saying this because it's, you know, Flat6Labs Bahrain, but honestly, I've been, you know, I've been in San Francisco. I'm close with 500, which is the biggest global VC accelerator for early stage. And honestly, I think we've got the cleanest and most crisp startup pitches globally, pretty much. So check it out, and that will be a very good starting point, I think, as well.
Saleh, what is the average duration of Flat6 involvement, you know, after the seed funding is done and the startup is go to the market or it's into the market? What's the gestation period before you take a call to exit? Is it predefined, or is it flexible depending upon, you know, each startup?
Yeah, so we don't exit usually for a long time. It's usually 7 to 10 years before we exit. We've had rare case scenarios where, you know, these golden opportunities come through, and it just doesn't make sense to because sometimes you'd want to hold on, but it could hinder the founders, the outcome for the founder, you know, like what's best for the founder over what's best for the investor. So I'll give you an example. We had a startup. They were called Harmonica, and when we met this guy, he was just in the idea stage, and in the space of 18 months, he got significant traction. And what he was doing was he was a dating. Yeah, he wasn't a dating app, but he was basically, it was a matrimonial matchmaking app that kind of took the speed version of you know, the speed version of Tinder and made it like a halal version, kind of, you know, like something that would work for conservative markets. And through that, he caught the eye of company, one of the companies, I don't know why it slipped my mind right now, but it's basically the biggest global company that they own OkCupid, they own Tinder, they own all the major dating websites and applications. And they came forward and they wanted to do a full acquisition. And basically they you know, these guys are the kings of this industry globally. And so it was an amazing opportunity for the founder, because they were like, we'll let you retain a small amount of equity. We'll keep you as CEO. We'll pay you a good salary. And we're going to bring on board all our technology and our knowledge of scaling globally. And we're going to use your startup basically as a vehicle to enter all the conservative markets across the world. And so with that kind of opportunity, you know, it was only 18 months. And in that scenario, we were thinking, you know, we could probably hold on to this. This is actually doing really well, and we might be able to exit at a higher amount later on down the line. But we don't want to stand in the way of what the founder really wants and what will be a great future for this company. You know? So in those scenarios, you just need to look out for the best interests of your entrepreneur, and you exit.
You said you receive a lot of applications for each cycle, and the numbers could range up to 400 to 500. If it is okay to mention, any of the startups that you have kind of seed funded and they're currently operating out of India? I mean, we are primarily from India, so just wanted to know if you have been, if you have already partnered with someone from India, and what's your experience of the kind of ideas that come from India. Especially. Yeah.
So yeah, we've partnered with we've actually invested in, out of the 36, there's 4 that are from India. And I mean, actually from India, a lot of them, I think, were based out of Kerala. But we had one was called Express Base, the other one was called FOAPS, another one was called Arctic Bot. And all of them are, the one thing that we noticed is, they're all B2B. And they're all basically trying to operate on a SaaS model. So it seems B2B and SaaS as a monetization model is what's quite popular coming out of India as a startup.
Right.
And I think it would have been great if we had been aware of your society back then, because a lot of them, where they would struggle is that they would come over to Bahrain, and we would have them go through the program and everything, and they would struggle on the business development front of getting into the right doors, and we would do a lot of that for them. But at a certain point, when you're out of the program, we're focusing on the next batch, you need to become self-sufficient. Like it's your startup, like you need to start to lead on the business development, especially with your B2B, and it's all reliant on business development over typical B2C marketing, right? So yeah, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Saleh. Saleh, other important question I have is, you have to say whether it is a myth or it's a reality, is startups are generally meant only for young Turks, in the early 20s to the late 20s. And, those who are, typically of the age of, let's say, 45 or 40 plus, they just better focus on, doing what they are. And perhaps, startup is not the, kind of, ecosystem they want to be. What has been your experience? In the last few years, have you seen startups being brought to you by someone who's like 40, 45 plus, and that seems to be a viable product?
Yes, definitely. So I'd say that, to put it politely, is that all that talk about it being just a young man's game is completely BS. And there's a bunch of reasons that are just logical for that, right? One is you could have a great idea. You might be very technical as well at knowing how to build your product. You might even understand when it comes to B2C, how to market in ways that, the older generation might not know how to market towards the younger generation correctly. However, what they struggle with is a lot of business acumen, right? So they don't understand how to scale their companies. A lot of the times they're not sure of how to lead it. They don't understand how to deal with the finances. Even on the VC side, they might get greedy, and that immaturity shows when it comes to, investors will take advantage of that. And, we've had young entrepreneurs that are very strong, but have been basically sold away so much of their company when they didn't need to. And they didn't even understand, how am I going to utilize this fund that I've raised to scale my company, right? Did I need to give away 15% now and raise $200,000 when I don't have a plan on how to utilize that $200,000? Or could I have grown the company and then tried to raise a smaller amount on less equity and retained ownership, which will then end up being worth a lot more in the future, right? So I would say, even you look at Sync and you look at Integrab and some of our biggest success stories, none of them are, below 30. They're all over 30 years old. They're all in their mid 30s and beyond. So even when you look at Zuckerberg and you look at Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all these guys that were, these guys are exceptions, right? These are like the ones that we know as being the biggest in the world as entrepreneurs and founders. But even then, when you know the background of venture capital, the thing that people don't realize is that it's the VCs that really grow these companies. It's not the young guy with the good idea at the beginning. It's basically they become a sort of student to the VCs, because the VCs, they end up on the board, and what they do a lot of the times is like they play a major role in making sure that company can scale, because where a lot of them implode is that when they get too big, they don't know how to keep up with the demand, they don't know how to grow the company, and that's where, you know, a lot of them will fail. And that's when if you have a really good VC on your board, that guy almost steps in directly as a COO pretty much and really starts to run the company. And in a lot of cases, you'll also get that the board ends up realizing, you know, you're no longer capable of being the CEO of this company. You're just too young and you don't have the experience. The company's outgrown the founder. And that happens all the time, where basically the founder gets forced out of his company and somebody else gets pulled in to replace him as the CEO.
Sureshji, you can ask your question. Suresh Surana.
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me? Yeah. You did ask about the entrepreneurs in India, but locally in Bahrain also, do you entertain expatriates or only Bahraini companies?
No, locally as well. So any company that's incorporated in Bahrain is considered a Bahraini company. Yeah, so and if you're not incorporated in Bahrain, our legal team will incorporate you in Bahrain. So like, for example, even if you don't have commercial registration and we like the company, we'll take care of the registration and the costs and everything, and then you know, that's the only mandate there is, right? So I was saying before that, like, the LP is Tamkina, is there for a reason, right? Like, it's good that they get to have a return on their investment, but they're not a private equity firm. Their main concern isn't the return on their investment. It's not about it being a multiplier. It's about it being an economic input, right? So they just want job creation and company creation. And so that's why their only concern really is that what they want to see is that you want to grow something in Bahrain, that you want to incorporate in Bahrain, and that you want to grow something in Bahrain that will then go on to the rest of the market.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Right. Saleh, before we go to maybe the last couple of questions, we need to do a customary ceremony of taking photos. I mean, we usually take photos in a physical session, but now that we can't do it, it's a virtual session. I request every participant to unmute their videos so that we can click a couple of pictures before we ask Saleh the last couple of questions. I request everyone to please have their videos on. It will not take more than a minute. I assure you that.
Okay.
Ajit, Natasha, Naresh, I'm going to call out the names, I mean, so that we know that you are not switching on the video. Craig, Raghu Iyer, Farhan, Tom, Gaurav Agarwal. So my colleague Ajay is of course clicking the pictures as we are, naming the people who have switched or not switched on the video. Natasha, Naresh, Pankaj Jain, Kurian Thomas. I hope you guys are still around and not just switched on the mobile and laptop and gone away.
You never know. You never know. That's the sneak part of doing everything on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
That's
no,
actually
Saleh been interesting. It's been really interesting. I'm sure all of them are there.
Right. Once I get a confirmation from my colleague Ajay that we have got the names, but not all of them. Yeah. Saleh, I mean, I have a very important question. I mean, of course, all questions are important, but this is something which is very personal. I mean, you have many people coming up with you with a lot of ideas, and not everybody goes through, your tough evaluation process. But have you got any experience where you let go an opportunity or let go an application, but then that particular idea actually was perhaps supported by somebody else, and that went on to become really big? I mean, do you have any such experience you want to share? One of those.
Yeah, there is, and it's usually ones where it's not that we let them go. It's like we've identified them, and then for some reason we haven't managed to come to an agreement on the terms with the equity. I mean, that literally even happened recently, and you'll always get that. That'll happen almost like once or twice, not once or twice, but I'd say like you get it at least once a year where you've identified it, you've got it in the final 8, and they've just gotten a bit too greedy to a point where it's too much of a risk on our side, and then they do end up doing really well, which is great. But it's just you can't think, you can't have. I guess younger generation now, they call it FOMO, which is fear of missing out.
Yes.
And you can't have that emotion, because it will cloud your judgment when it comes to not just when it comes to this field of investing, even if you're investing in stocks and things like that. That kind of emotion, it'll play games with how you make sound decisions, pretty much. But yeah, we've definitely had that happen before, and we've even had companies that I've like really pushed for that. You know, we already had another one doing the same thing in Bahrain, but I felt the one that was international was way better. And then, you know, we've gone with the one here, and the international one. I think it was like 2 months later, you know, they just wanted us to invest $32,000, and they won $500,000 in competition. So in a pitch competition. So it's better for them, because that was they didn't have to give up any ownership for that. So yeah, definitely it happens.
Yeah, once you let go an application, is there a cooling period for the same guy to come up with a better idea or an improvised idea? What's the cooling period, if there is?
Yes, so people can apply every cycle. And with us, we're totally fine with that, because like we understand that this process requires a lot of iteration and pivoting, and so that's always going to be a natural thing. And I've even had companies that I sort of was fond of, but they weren't ready to enter. And I've kept track of them, and then they've come back cycle after cycle. And by maybe 2 cycles later, when they've come back, they've ended up being at the right stage for us to invest in them. So yeah, it's definitely one of those scenarios where, you know, the thing is, what you really need to do is that if you've been through the first cycle and you haven't made it through, and then you're reapplying, is to really try and emphasize in that application what's changed, right? Like, what have you changed compared to before? Or are you just reapplying and you're at the same stage as you were when we didn't accept you last time, right? So it's important to make the investor aware of that.
Saleh, I have a question. So I don't know how big Flat6Labs is, Flat6Labs is in terms of the staffing and other things, and you know, typically how many people are involved in assessing an idea, and what are the chances that you use external consultants or finance professionals for all these sort of things that you do? We are predominantly a community of finance professionals, so I think that would be something very interesting. I think a lot of experience there in that field.
Yeah. So when it comes to assessing the applications? Yeah. So basically, it started at the beginning. It was 3 of us. It was me and my 2 colleagues, and then it started to be more mainly reliant on me and Rayan, who used to be in Flat6Labs as well. And now it's pretty much right now it's just me that assesses all the application and source through them, and I'll basically usually shortlist the final 20. And what happens is that I'll then liaise with, I'll pick my final 20, and then I'll also have like 10 backups or so, and I'll then consult with the CIO, who's the Chief Investment Officer, and the CEO, who are both headquartered in Egypt, and we'll basically run through the picks, and I'll explain and justify like why I think these guys are the right guys and on each one. And then we come up with the final 20, and the final 8 is not completely my decision or even the CEO's decision. We will kind of agree that, like, these are the 8 we really want to see go through and get the investment out of those 20. And then we'll let the rest of the selection panel have their opinion. But naturally, it's our company, so we're gonna like try and argue our point on why we think our 8 are the right 8. If we feel that they've made a good point that perhaps we haven't thought of, then we decide, okay, you're right. We didn't think about this weakness or something like that. And that's why we get the two entrepreneurs to come in, because usually they'll be experts in deeper technical matters that naturally, I mean, we're very good at understanding technology and understanding where there's gaps in our market and understanding monetization models, and understanding the capability of people. But it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to be experts on every single vertical or every single subject matter, right? So that's where we try and bring these other two in to compensate on.
Right. Saleh, this will be the last question, I assure you, is if there is one rule you should never break as a startup founder, one rule as a startup founder that you should not break, what it would be?
So the one rule I'd say is, and you get a lot, especially the younger ones, because they haven't had a massive failure or they haven't been humbled yet at this point, and it ends up being a big problem for a lot of them, is always be hungry for knowledge. So I'd say never break that rule, and also never think that you know it all, that you have all the answers, because you know it's kind of a natural tendency that you get, you know, especially with the younger entrepreneurs, that they're like, yeah, I can take on the world. I got this amazing idea, and like I know better than everyone, but the only people they've met maybe are their parents and their parents' friends or something. And they think that, you know, they have a superior kind of knowledge to everything. And those ones, they end up failing. They always end up failing, because basically they don't take on board advice well. They don't learn. They aren't the types that, also those kind of personalities, they're inside, they're kind of insecure with entering different things that they're not familiar with, right? So they won't be that well-rounded founder. So they won't go and figure out, how do I do my own accounts? And how do I go and study up about coding? You know, like I shouldn't just outsource the development. If I'm a good founder, I should understand the benefits of whether I'm building a native application or whether I'm going to build a hybrid model that can be used on both operating systems at the same time, or at least go and understand the fundamentals of every single part of your business, you know? So, so I think that's the number one rule, is never stop being hungry for knowledge, and don't ever think that you know it all. Take on board advice from everybody, and the biggest skill is being able to recognize, oh, this guy is going to be an amazing mentor. I should get close to this person. They're going to have huge value to me. And then also knowing when, you know, you do get a lot of people, especially also in this region as well, where it's like, you know, they want to help, and they might not always know what they're talking about, and so they might actually give you the wrong advice or the wrong information because they don't want to admit that this isn't their area of expertise. So it's also being able to decipher between the two, you know, like learn how to pick the best out of everybody, but have open ears to what everyone has to say as well.
Right, Saleh. I told you that was my last question, but this was a question which I had to ask you sometimes in the middle. What is the ratio of the male to female startup entrepreneurs you often get in your applications or in your advanced stages of funding? You know, like is it like mainly male, or you see a good participation from the female future entrepreneurs?
It's mainly male. So I'd say right now we're at around, probably it's like 70% to 30% male to female ratio. We do have like some good female founders. In fact, one of the founders I was talking about earlier, and one of our success stories, Tel, she's probably in some of her own rights one of the strongest founder out of all the portfolio. And she still has a long way to go. She's only 24 years old. Yeah, so, you know, we've had some amazing, exceptional female founders, but definitely we need more. There's a lot more that needs to start coming into the startup field. And there's also a lot more verticals that they're better suited to, I think, than men are, you know, and that they can understand that side of the market better, and that they would also sell the startup better as a founder than a man would. So, you know, I kind of have been trying to work on initiatives with the Supreme Council of Women and other things to try and find ways to like get them on board and get them Bahrain Business Women's Society and things like that to get them more on board with participation. But yeah, I'd say right now it's lower than what I'd like to see it as. And at the same time, we're not what I don't want us to do, and which I feel is something I don't like seeing in the West, especially in North America, is that they always kind of, whenever they're at their demo days or they're talking about their cycle, they're like, oh, and we've hit this 50% ratio or 60% ratio or 48% ratio of female founders and all that. And they make it such a thing, like such a selling point of like, oh, look at us, we're progressive, we're this. I see it kind of as the opposite of progressive in a way, because you want to enable everyone. And you never want to start affecting the psychology of the people that are doing the filtration and telling them that, hey, you need to hit this mandate where we have to have like this much ratio at least of female founders, because there's no reason to prioritize one over the other. Whoever's got the best model, whoever's the most investable, those are the ones that should get it, right? So on our side, one thing I make sure is I never make it a priority that would affect having a fair outcome for all parties concerned. So I think that's another thing to always keep in mind. And at the same time, I'd say that through that way, you kind of get the best overall outcome. You get also this kind of agenda in the States I saw where, you get a lot of people saying that they're going to set up a female-only VC only for investing in women. And, I knew a lot of them because I've been on courses with some of the people that have their own venture capital funds that are only focused on women. And I was like, I really find it hard to believe that there's a glass ceiling when it comes to investment, because I would like to believe, I don't think I'm the exception, that everybody that's an investor is just thinking about money. Like we're just thinking about profit, and we're thinking about what's going to make the most revenue and what's going to be the least risky. And I really don't think that there's like in this day and age, I would hope at least that there's not a big bias of thinking, oh no, she can't do it because she's a woman. I think it would be that everybody will be open to the idea of investing in whoever has the best business.
Fantastic. I think I'm glad that I asked that question, and you were very articulate in describing why this thing is very important, and in this present scenario as well. We have many questions, but we are running out of time. So I would request our Master of Ceremonies to take the session forward. Jagdish, if you are online.
Yeah. Thank you, CA Magesh. And thank you, Saleh, for your wonderful session. Let me call CA Magesh to facilitate our speaker as a part of token of advance.
Session, we of course present a token of gratitude to our speaker for taking time and sharing his valuable knowledge with us. But this being a Zoom meeting, we will be providing you a virtual certificate of appreciation, and please accept that on our behalf. And maybe sometimes in future, when I get a chance to see you in person, or we invite you for a in-person session, which I'm sure will be on the cards in the coming I would say months, not say weeks, but in the coming months. And we will look forward for more such interactive sessions with you. And thanks for sharing your wonderful knowledge with us.
Great. Thanks.
I hope you can see the certificate on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it. It's pretty cool.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Jagdish.
Thank you, CA Magesh Kumar. Now we are in the end of the session. Now, thank you, speakers, Abbas, and thank you, our election officer, CA Mani, for conducting the election successfully. And thank you all the ESCOM members who are supporting to make this election meeting successful. And finally, thanks all the members who attend this virtual election meeting and made it grand success. Thank you. Thank you all.
I would also want to acknowledge the support from Saleh Abbas team member Noor Bahman, I'm not sure whether she has joined today's session, but she was kind enough to, lend the back-end support. And also to our friend Khalid Saad, the former CEO of Bahrain FinTech Bay, who was instrumental in patching us with your colleague Ryan. Of course, Ryan could not make it today, but we are thankful to both this gentleman and the lady for their support, as much as we are thankful for Saleh for being here with us today.
Yeah, and if any of you want to get in contact, you can just look me up on LinkedIn. If you put in Saleh Abbas, you should find me pretty easily. And yeah, just feel free to get in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think with this, we will conclude today's meeting, and we wish all of you rest of the day a happy good evening and good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all.
Thank you.